wake up late at night and find a woman in a red Cheongsam sitting in front of your bedroom dresser, slowly combing her long hair? Do you choose to hold your breath and get up quietly to find out, or close your eyes and pretend not to see anything? This happened when I was just in junior high school. At that time, I was the kind of person who was not good at studying and was unwilling to learn, but I always had various thoughts in my heart. Especially when facing the pressure of studying, it felt like a mountain pressing on me. Seeing the other students in the class perform well one by one, my mood felt like I was hit hard. Every day when I came home from school, I could feel my parents' expectant eyes, but the sense of powerlessness and depression that could not meet their expectations sometimes really weighed me down. During that time, I often thought of escaping, thinking that as long as I could leave this city and leave this suffocating environment, maybe I could find true freedom. At school, I had a close friend who I had known for many years, from elementary school to junior high school. She was much more cheerful than me, and always found all kinds of interesting topics to make me happy. Whenever I felt depressed and helpless at school, he was the only one who could make me forget my troubles for a while. We often ate and talked together. We had no reservations about each other, and he was the only person I could talk to. But in fact, his life was not easy. His original family was not harmonious. His parents often quarreled, and sometimes I even heard him mention domestic violence. Although he pretended to be indifferent on the surface, I could feel that deep down in his heart, he was actually desperate to escape from the family. Whenever we talked about family and the future, he always sighed helplessly, saying he didn't know what to do. Once, on the way home from school, I finally mustered the courage to tell him what was on my mind. I said, "I really don't want to go on like this anymore. There is no hope for study at all, and the pressure is so great. I want to run away from home." When I said this, I felt both nervous and excited, as if I had finally found a breakthrough. He was stunned for a moment, and then he showed the same expression as me, like a desire to see light in the dark. "Shall we go together?" I asked him tentatively with a hint of expectation. After a few seconds of silence, he nodded and said in a low voice, "I've thought about it for a long time. If the two of us leave, it will be better to go anywhere than now. Whether we go to other places or work, it will be better than the hopeless study now." His voice was a little choked, but there was a firmness in his eyes, and at this moment we seemed to find a resonance with each other. From then on, we began to plan to run away from home. We often fantasized about our future life, maybe going to a strange city, renting a small house, working and living together every day. Although life may be a little hard, at least we can be free and unrestrained. We even imagined how to learn to deal with daily chores independently. We firmly believed that as long as we left our current life, we could find a new way out. During the National Day holiday that year, we lied to our family and said we were going out to play. It was also with this excuse that the two of us started planning to run away from home. He brought a backpack, and I brought some clothes. He bought some bread, and I prepared some supplies. We thought we could go anywhere as long as we could get out of here. Since we lived in a coastal city, we walked along the beach. As we walked, the surroundings began to become empty, with only the sound of the waves and a large field of straw. Soon, we came to what looked like a shrimp enclosure, with a lot of straw next to it. I thought it would be a good place for us to hide for a while. Although it was already October, the weather was not too cold. We put on our coats, sat in the straw, ate some bread, drank some water, and planned to turn off our phones temporarily so that we could not be found at home. Just as I was about to turn off my phone, my best friend suddenly pointed not far away and said, "Look, is there a small house in that straw field?" I followed his finger to see that there was indeed a small house, and the lights were still flashing inside. At this time, the sky had gradually darkened, and the sea breeze at night had become even colder. I looked at the small house, and it seemed to be quite warm inside, and the warm yellow light came out and it seemed very safe. We both stared at the small house for a while, and suddenly I saw a figure coming out of it. It was about 10 meters away from us, not close, but not far. I patted my best friend on the shoulder and whispered, Do you think someone came out of that house? My best friend looked at it for a long time, then frowned and said, "No, I didn't see anyone. It's impossible. I clearly saw someone just now." At this time, I also started to panic. When I took a closer look, sure enough, the figure was gone. Only the yellow light was still flashing, and the two of us didn't think much about it. We continued to be busy planning to run away from home, but strangely, the figure was always lingering in my mind. There was always an indescribable chill coming from behind, and I always felt that something was wrong. I couldn't help but take another look at the small house, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw it. The originally dim yellow light suddenly turned dark red, and it flickered more frequently. I quickly told my girlfriend, and her face turned pale after seeing the change in the light. The more we looked, the more terrified we felt, and the more we thought about it, the more scared we became. At that time, although we two little girls had the courage to run away from home, we were instantly cowardly in the face of this situation. At this time, the sky had completely darkened and the surroundings were dead silent. Finally, the two of us discussed it and decided to go home first. This place was too desolate and too scary. After going back, we can replan the route. Next time I run away from home, I will pick a route with people. At least I will not be so afraid. After returning home at night, I experienced the first ghost press in my life. I had just laid down and started dreaming. In the dream, I appeared in an ancient Chinese-style house. I was very awake at the time, knowing that I was dreaming, and I was very resistant to the dream in my heart because the atmosphere of the house was shrouded in a sinister atmosphere, which made me feel like I was falling into a nightmare. I desperately wanted to wake up, even trying to open my eyelids with my hands, desperately wanting to get out of this dream. However, no matter how hard I tried, I found that I couldn't move at all. My limbs were stiff, and I couldn't even make a sound. I struggled desperately, and finally barely opened my eyes. But an even more creepy scene happened. I saw a black shadow sitting in front of the dresser. Looking at the mirror, it turned out to be a long-haired woman wearing a Red Cheongsam, and her figure seemed to be shrouded in a layer of mist. Although I couldn't see it clearly, her existence was unusually real. Because the curtains were closed at that time, the light in the room was very dim. But what made me even more terrified was that he actually emitted a dark red light, which seemed to be silently warning me when it was bright and dark. Suddenly, I thought of the red light in the small house we had seen before, and I wanted to shout for help, but the sound couldn't come out at all, and my limbs seemed to be frozen, completely unable to move. At this moment, the woman in red suddenly turned her head, and I was too scared to look anymore. I quickly closed my eyes, and before I knew it, I fell asleep again. When I woke up again, the sky was already bright, and I immediately struggled to move my hands and feet, and finally felt my body regain its intuition. That day, I told my mother what happened yesterday, and my mother was terrified after hearing it, so I quickly asked a very famous local master to help. After listening to my account, the master asked me if I had been to the small house before. I shook my head and said no. Then the master asked me to show him the place, and although I was a little uneasy, I led him there. When we went back during the day, there was no house at all in the straw field, which made my heart go hairy. The master stood where we sat last night for a while, eyes closed, and I don't know what was going on in his mouth. Then he told me that you may have accidentally sat in the seat of someone's old house, otherwise you wouldn't have seen that house. Hearing this, I shuddered in my heart and asked the master, "What happened to the woman in red who appeared in my room last night?" The master replied, "Of course he was not happy that you occupied someone's land, and he followed you back." Finally, the master handed me 2 talismans, one for me to stick on the mirror of the dresser when I got home, and the other for me to stick on the seat where my best friend and I sat last night. Then he told me that if I heard anything again at night, I would ignore it and leave the rest to him. Strangely, since that day, I have never dreamed of the old Chinese house and the woman in the Red Cheongsam.